Hello, this is Eugenia with Radiant Warrior Living, and today I'm here to talk about our ways that we think about different things in our life, how we worry, and what we think about. Do you find yourself thinking about things that might happen? Do you find yourself worrying about your family, your relatives? Do you find yourself waking up in the middle of the night and thinking about things that might happen? If you do, then you're not alone. A lot of people, a lot of us actually have a lot of thoughts throughout the day and in the middle of the night about potential things that might happen, worrying about different scenarios and thinking about how things might play out. So all of that is absolutely normal. What I'd like to talk about today is that if you are ready to start paying attention to the thoughts that happen throughout your day and the patterns of thinking and to the worries that show up in different points in your life, it's the first step to start noticing how you feel and to start noticing those thoughts. And then if you're ready, we can start talking about changing the patterns of thinking, changing the patterns of behavior, which in turn will help you understand what those worries are about and help you process them and feel differently. So my work and what I do is I work with professional women who connect to who they are, helping them to connect to who they are and find their voice. So a lot of women that I work with, especially, are women who have careers and kids and families and have a lot on their plate at one time. And I find that a lot of my clients have worries and things throughout the day that show up. If it's something that shows up all of a sudden, or things about their career or projects that they have to work on, which have deadlines. So these are all things that I find a lot of people in different walks of life. You don't have to have a family to have things to worry about, or you don't have to have a big family or a lot of responsibilities. We all have things that we worry about. So I'd like to start with something that is important as the first step in understanding what are some of the things that go through your head. Most of us actually have such busy lives, and our minds are so busy that we don't even have a chance sometimes to truly understand what goes on, because we are busy finishing something and moving on to the next thing, and we always worry about being on time or making it for a certain appointment and so on. So when you start your day, my last video was about starting your day and kind of having the proper morning routine. I find that the way you start your day is really how the rest of the day will go. So your morning will determine how your day will go. So it is a good idea if you can wake up a little bit earlier to give yourself time to be in stillness, to be in the quiet of your own home, of your own energy, to understand where you're at, to bring yourself back to the center and to kind of connect to your senses, and to also put intention into the day. So that's a really good place to start, no matter what you have planned for the day. But when you start with an opportunity to connect to yourself and to connect to your center and to think about the things that you have to look forward to in the day and that you have to finish, it will allow you to feel like you have a little more pace, you have a little more control about your day. So if there is a chance to start your day with a certain sense of, even 5 minutes in the quiet and in silence, and to think about what you want your day to be like, that's a great start. Now, one of the ways that I find is really helpful is to have little breaks in your day. So, between, 2 minutes to 5 minutes. If you can have a break in your day where you can just stop, and if you have, a phone, and you can put an alarm on your phone, every few hours, every 3 to 4 hours, I recommend to have a little alarm on your phone and call it a mindfulness alarm, or call it something more fun. That will allow you to connect to kind of what am I feeling, and to be able to sort of come back to that place. Very often, things that we worry about are either in the past or in the future. Uh, there's lots of research that shows that I think the number is about 40% of things that we worry about are in the future. 30% of things we worry about are in the past, and the other number of things we worry about are potentially not even real. So when you think about what are some of the things that you worry about, and in that moment when you come back to that point of stillness throughout the day, I recommend to take a pen and paper and to write down what are some of the things that you worry about. That will allow you to be a little bit more mindful, and to understand what are some of the things that go through your head, and that keep you kind of on your feet, and really give you a sense of worry and anxiety. The mindfulness practice is very, very important if you want to really understand where you're at. Because very often, again, our minds are racing and we have so much going on that we're not able to fully grasp the sense of worry and the sense of fear that comes up in where it's coming from. So if it's really hard and you don't have a lot of time, what I suggest you do is understand what you're feeling, and have one word that you describe that feeling as. So for example, if you're going through your day, and you have an alarm go off at around 11 o'clock that says, a quick mindfulness break, ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? And you can name that feeling without feeling any judgment around it. Just name that feeling for yourself and allow yourself to feel that feeling. If it's sadness, then feel that sadness without judging what it is and why it is there. So that way, when you name the feeling and you let it be there, that feeling is processed in your body and it's not stuck there. A lot of the times when you ask people what they're worried about, a lot of people just have that sense of constant worry and they cannot name it, or they haven't really spent the time to name it. So it's very important to name that feeling. So definitely recommend that. So the mindfulness break, naming the feeling. The next thing you can do is at the end of the day, if you're able to, you can start writing down things that you've thought about. This is very good to do even during the day. If there's not a lot of time, then at the end of the day, just stop and think, what have you been thinking about? What are some of the things that have showed up for you today? And when you are writing these things down, notice, what are you feeling? And the next thing to ask yourself, why am I feeling this way? Is it even true? Very often our minds play tricks on us, and it takes over, and we play all those different scenarios in our head that are not even real. So sometimes it's good to ground yourself and to bring yourself to a place of understanding that what you're thinking about is probably not even something that can happen, or it's something that maybe happened in the past. And if it happened in the past, can you do anything to change it now? That's a good question to ask yourself. And what am I feeling about it? So if you can name the feeling again and let it come through you and process and understand and accept the way you feel, then you're able to move forward without just having that overwhelming sense of worry and discomfort. So the mindfulness starts in noticing and naming the way you feel. The next thing that is important is thinking about things you can control in your life. Very often we have lots of circumstances around us, and one of them, for example, is the weather. And we have sometimes certain plans, and nature says otherwise. And when we worry, and I see people around me a lot who let those things stress them out, and those are the things that are completely out of our control. So what are some of the things that in your life that are in your control, And if they're not in your control, are you able to accept it? Or are you able to find another solution to work with what you have? Very often when we are, you know, maybe when we are thinking about things um, that are so overwhelming, and when we have things that we can't control, they can drive us crazy. And understanding that life goes on, no matter how we feel, is a very crucial thought. It's almost like a reality check, and it's almost like a 4x4 truck that goes, in between our eyes. And when we realize that, certain things in our life we can't control, and it's our choice of how we feel about those things. So if we're able to process the reality that life consists of many, many different things, and we always have a choice about how we feel about something. So it's your choice to worry about things that you can't control, or to let go and find a way to accept the things that are happening, and even potentially looking at the rainbow and the end of the clouds, and seeing how those things play out in life, and being able to have faith and trust. Being able to have faith and trust definitely helps in life. And very often when we are consumed by worry, in our mind we play out all these different scary scenarios. So when we go through life and we're not thinking about how do we move forward with whatever we've got, or we're so focused on that worry, it's really hard to see the forest from the trees. So in those moments, I do recommend to have a few phrases. They're called affirmations, or anything that can help you bring yourself back to the sense of who you are, to sort of that state of being when you're not so worried and overwhelmed that you cannot think of anything else. And when you are in that state of worry and anxiety and overwhelm, it's impossible to come up with those phrases. So it's important to have them in advance somewhere. So for example, one of the phrases that I use quite a bit is, I feel peace and love, or peace and love. And when you keep saying those things in the moments when you're overwhelmed and anxious, when I say those things, I feel a sense of peace and love. Those words hit me and resonate at a deeper level of myself, and bring me that and remind me of that peace and love that is always available. So what are some of the things that you can say to yourself in those moments where you can stop yourself from going to a kind of a dark, to a dark place, and in those moments of stress and overwhelm? Because if you're able to bring yourself to that place, you're able to stop your mind from hijacking everything and taking you to a really dark place. So it's having those phrases prepared. Some other ones is, I'm able to handle anything. That's another one of mine. Or, everything will be okay. So when I say that to myself, I feel a sense of peace, and I feel a sense of strength and power that comes from somewhere where I'm able to actually feel that I can handle anything. It does give me that resolve, and it reminds me of the things that I have within me, and that I'm able to handle whatever comes. So what are some of the phrases that you can say to yourself in those moments? And it's important to have them somewhere where you can look at them and think of that phrase. So, peace and love, or I know I can handle anything. What is it that you can say to yourself in that moment that can bring you back to that place of stillness, but also the place of, I can do this? Or it can bring that feeling that you need to remind yourself that you've been there before. The other thing that I find that is very, very helpful is when I kind of go back and I think about the past, and I think about the times where I've had to overcome certain big things in my life, and certain things that seemed overwhelming, and that I was able to do it. So so often in life we forget about how much we've been through, and we don't give ourselves the credit, and we don't remember what are some of the things that we've handled. So it's important to remind yourself where you've been and how much you've handled before. For one reason is to remind yourself of your capability. Very often when we are going through something stressful, we are reminded of how capable we are and how much we have inside of ourselves to be able to go through challenges. So when I work with people and I coach someone, I often bring them back to remind them and to ask them what are some of the situations that remind them of what they're going through right now, and how were they able to handle it in the past. So it's about the self-inquiry. It's about asking yourself, where have I been before, and how was I able to handle something like this or something similar? Again, it's not about keeping the dark memories. It's about reminding yourself that you have the ability to handle what it is that you're going through, or the things that you're worried about, and the things that keep you up at night or throughout your day. So it's going within and thinking about those moments. The next thing is very often we avoid things, and I find that when we avoid things in our lives, we fret about them a lot more often. So if there are things in your life that you avoid confronting or that you avoid dealing with, it's sometimes important to be honest with yourself and see what are some of the things that maybe are keeping me up at night or make me worry that I haven't handled or that I haven't been able to confront. Those are the things that sometimes can be there, and they're sort of lingering over us. And I find that very often when I ask myself that, I deal with something, and I call it dealing with something head on, but I know that whatever happens, it's out of my life, it's out of my control, but I've dealt with it, I've done my best. So it is really looking at, where are you avoiding some of the things, and are there things in your life that you've avoided for a while, which are in turn making your day-to-day life less than pleasant or less than what you want. So I find when I catch myself and I kind of look within and I am honest with myself, if there is something like that, I deal with it. And it's the same as avoiding doing certain tasks or things that we don't like. When we do avoid it, what happens is, especially when we have to work towards a deadline, when we avoid and procrastinate, we create a sense of worry for ourselves because we have not used the time that we've had to deal or to work on something. So what happens is, as we get closer to the deadline, we worry more and more, and that deadline pushes us to worry and eventually deal with it. But the amount of stress that we go through creates such an overwhelm. So one of the ways that I suggest to dealing with something like this is breaking down what you have to deal with into small increments if it's possible. So for example, if you have a project or something that you have to do and you know that it's not something pleasant or it's draining, or you kind of really avoid dealing with it, what about breaking it down into smaller tasks and starting with one step? What is one thing that I can do today, or one thing I can do right now to deal with what is bothering me, what is on my mind, or what I have to deal with? And doing that one thing and making that one step towards accomplishing what is it that you've been procrastinating on, or dealing with an issue that you've been avoiding for a while. So, it does take a sense of being honest with yourself and sort of a sense of, gaining clarity about what are some of the things that are showing up for me that I haven't dealt with in my life. So one of the things that, I want to talk about today is really about how do we get rid of some of the negativity and stress. And one of the things that I wanted to suggest is a 3-day detox. So basically, it's not about completely getting rid of the negativity and the stress, because I don't think it's sort of realistic or possible. But what are some of the ways that you can start doing that? So one of the things is noticing your thought patterns, noticing how much in life are you not happy with, and how much in life do you pay attention to the things that you're not happy with, and how much in your life do you complain and talk about it and spend time worrying about it. And understanding that, if a lot of your day spent doing that, that affects the quality of your day. And you might disagree right now, but if you start thinking about it, you'll realize that certain thoughts show up, they create certain feelings that affect your day. So if you can start noticing and maybe journaling some of the thoughts that show up, and also understanding how much, like the percentage of your day that you spent thinking about things, how much of the things that worry you are overwhelming you and taking over your day. So if you're able to notice the difference between the thoughts of things that you want in your life and the things that bring joy and pleasure and excitement in your life, how much of those thoughts are there versus the thoughts of something that you don't want and something that you're worrying about. So it's the first place to start, to understand sort of the percentage or the ratio of those thoughts. If you're able to write them down and be honest with yourself on where you spend your time and what you think about and what you're feeling throughout those moments, is where you'll be able to really understand and see the patterns. So I'm a believer that when there's a vacuum in the universe, it is filled with something. So one way to get rid or not have as many sort of worrying or negative thoughts is to start flipping the switch. So if you're thinking of something that is worrisome to you, that is creating a sense of stress, think about that thought and see how is it that this thought can be replaced, because you can't sort of completely cut it out of your life, but if you're going to get rid of it, what can you replace that thought with? One of my techniques is that every time I start worrying or thinking about things that I don't want to happen, I realize that I'm putting my energy into something I don't want, and I see that as a waste of my energy. So I start thinking about what is it that I want instead. And that's where I find, the power of prayer, or power of putting, you thinking about things that you want is important. So, for example, if I worry about something not working out, or I worry about my kids, I think about, okay, what am I worried specifically about? And I think about, what do I want my kids to experience in this moment? Or where, if they're traveling somewhere and I'm worried about them traveling and not phoning me, I think about what I want them to be safe right now. I want them to be having a good time. I want them to be in a good place right now. So I'm sending those thoughts, and I think about, where do I want my thoughts to go, and what am I wishing for my child? So instead of worry, I start thinking about wishing, what am I wishing? What am I sending to them? Instead of sending worry and stress their way, I'm thinking about, what am I sending to them? So when you're able to replace the negative thought with a positive one, or with the thought of what you want, you'll start noticing how often those thoughts show up, because that first step in mindfulness will take you to a different place. And believe me, it works. I've practiced it many times, and when you become mindful of the things that take over your day, it will allow you to take control and to be able to flip that switch. So notice also how often when people around you bring something up, something that maybe, the weather is not working, or this is not working, or the politics, how often we get caught up in these conversations, and how often those conversations affect us. So it's allowing to, those people can have a choice of what they talk about and what they're thinking, but we can allow what we bring into our life. And when we pay attention, we can avoid, or we can walk away from the situations and conversations that are not adding to our day. So what I've started noticing is that when I am interacting with someone, is this interaction bringing a positive or not such a positive feeling into my life? Is this conversation an uplifting conversation or a productive conversation? Because very often when people, or when we complain and talk about things we don't want, it's not a productive conversation, because it's really something that potentially will drain us down. And gossip, I find, is one of those things. And sometimes there's certain sense of connecting to someone and talking about someone else, but if that conversation brings you to a place of really kind of starting to really dig deep for the things that you don't like, that's not a conversation that will be uplifting for you. And we all have people around us, and sometimes we cannot avoid it when people talk to us about things that we don't want, but we can find a way to not be present or to not fully absorb that energy. So one of the ways that I deal with it is I don't kind of disagree with the person if they want to sort of talk about something negative. I try to either change the conversation and talk about more pleasant subjects, or I kind of my responses are pretty short, which shows the person that I'm not really interested in the subject. Or sometimes I'm energetically just sort of shut down, which is pretty clear for most people that I no longer want to continue the conversation. And if I find that people sort of are not getting the message, then I just politely say that I don't have the time right now. I'm sorry, I gotta go. But I do it all with complete like no judgment and total understanding that some people are just not aware, and they might be going through something and they want to connect to someone and be heard, which is totally understandable. I'm not saying that life is all kind of roses and it's always pleasant, but we can choose what we allow ourselves to get caught up in, and how we allow others to influence our day. And it's about the mindfulness of thinking about what are some of the things that are working well. Because I find that when I'm not having a good day, if things are in my mind, this is not working, and if I go that way, it's very easy to just basically say nothing is working well. And if you say that to yourself, believe me, the universe will find a way for it to happen in your life. So I try to switch myself to a place of, okay, but what is working? What is going well? Where can I find that light at the end of the tunnel that can get me to switch to a different place or to a different feeling? And sometimes that's a place where I look for different signs. It's noticing something around me, and seeing somebody smile, or noticing something that will allow me to hook into a more positive feeling, or even smiling to myself really helps. But we live in the internet era. There's so much that we can find the cat videos online. We can find lots of funny videos, or lots of funny sayings, memes that sometimes can create that switch and switch our mood. So a lot of these things are the small things that are in our control. And when we are worrying and stressed, of course it's hard to think about, okay, how can I switch this? How can I get out of this place? But it's remembering that we are able to do it at any moment of our day. It is in our choice. And things that we worry about, it's really understanding and gaining clarity why we worry about them. Because very often, and a lot of these things come from our childhood. They're the things that potentially we've seen our parents worry about, and we've noticed them do it, and we've learned those patterns from them. So it's thinking about yourself, and maybe bringing yourself to those times when you were a child. What were the things that you were worried about? Have you noticed adults in your life to worry about things? Very often we think about money worries, right? And I, for example, have grown up where there were certain phrases I've heard, and that made me think about all these things that I was worried about, and how you could money doesn't grow on trees, and all of these things that somebody has said that have imprinted in my mind. So it's understanding what are some of those beliefs that we have picked up, and how they've influenced us, and how they still show up in our life and influence our life every day. So for that, I definitely recommend the journaling practice, and having a sense of noticing what you're thinking throughout the day, as I've mentioned many times in this video, which is really, really helpful. I can't say it enough, is that the first place to start is really start noticing, start writing down, start making points of catching yourself in that place. And it's also in the time where you do worry and you are stressed, it's maybe sometimes writing out what is it that you're stressed, because it's probably a legitimate worry in certain circumstances. So maybe it's allowing yourself to pour it out, or finding someone to talk to and letting it out. The problem is that very often either there's two ways that we deal with stressful situations. One is that we find a way to solve it. The other one is we allow it to spin in our mind, and then it becomes sort of a worry that is just a waste of energy. So if you have a stressful situation that is very legitimate and real, then what are some of the ways that you can find a solution for it? And very often we have all the solutions playing out in our head, but sometimes we don't get to kind of a place of resolving it. So if you do have something that is truly worrisome or stressful and needs to be resolved, it's finding the time that maybe you can sit down and find and look at a number of scenarios and solutions of how you can deal with it. So all of these things I recommend for the mindfulness and for the detox. And you can start today. I recommend a 3-day start, because 1 day is not enough and 1 week might be a little bit too long. So the first thing you do is you get a journal, or you use the current journal that you have, and throughout the day you catch yourself, or you notice the thoughts that go through your mind for the 3 days. And when you are noticing and you're writing down some of the thoughts that are showing up, to be able to see the ratio of the positive versus negative, think about how can you change that thought. Is that true? Why am I feeling it? And what are some of the ways that I can find a way to switch that thought to what I want? Once you're able to go through sort of the 3 days, if on the third day of writing things down and kind of making those notes and understanding the ratio, from the third day you start catching yourself and really seeing, and being honest with yourself on how much of the thoughts that are going through your head are the repeating thoughts. What are those patterns? Are you able to switch those patterns? Are you able to start finding solutions and start understanding what are some of the things that are showing up that you can So and at the end of the 3 days, you look at the thoughts and you start seeing the ratio of what are some of the things that you'd like to you'd like to change, and what are some of the things that you like to expand, some of the thoughts that you like to expand in your life. When you're able to see that ratio and seeing the patterns of some of the thoughts that are repeating in your head and sort of becoming maybe obsessive or something that shows up constantly, it's finding ways to go into stillness and being more mindful around when those thoughts show up, and how you can process them and allow yourself to feel those feelings. And when you also are able to be honest with yourself about the complaints that you make, or how you allow others sometimes to hijack your day, what are some of the ways that you can change those patterns? And some of us are very polite and very nice, but if it's affecting your day, there's something that you can do about it, and it is in your hands. And the next thing is, once you're able to see the patterns, it is your choice. It is your choice about how much of your day do you want to spend in things that worry you and stress you out and overwhelm you, and how much of your day do you want to think about the things that you want more of in your life and that you want to bring into your life. And one more thing, if after 3 days you are able to see how you are and what are some of the patterns of your thoughts, first of all, congratulations. And after that, it's about starting to giving yourself the space to make the changes. Do you want to make the changes and start doing things differently? Start changing the pattern of your behavior. If yes, then what are some of the fears that you need to tackle? So if there's specific fears and worries that shows up, what are they? Looking at them and seeing how you can move forward with becoming more of a, expanding yourself and starting to venture towards the territory that might be scaring you. So I won't go into sort of the next big leap that it would take. I will make another video on that. I'm hoping that the mindfulness practice about noticing your thoughts, writing them down. If you want to do the 3-day detox, I will post some notes on what are some other suggestions that I recommend. I do recommend starting your day on the right note, or at least spending a few moments thinking about your day, thinking about what you want to happen in your day, and bringing your senses together so that you can start your day from a place of more peace versus get up and start taking things head on, which will sometimes make you feel frazzled and make you feel like there's too much going on. So there's lots of different things that I've talked about here, but I'm hoping that the 3-day detox is something that maybe you'll decide to take on, or at least start noticing some of the thinking and some of the patterns that you have been you have had in your life. And I find that when you start with a certain mindfulness and a sense of honesty with yourself, then it's the first step towards starting to change things, as well as understanding that a lot of these things are in our control, and the choice that we make every day, at every moment, and that tomorrow is a new day, and that each of us can start fresh. I wish you a wonderful day. Thank you very much for everyone who was watching.